For decades, the United States has largely called the shots in a bitter, long-running trade war over a single, crucial commodity: wood. Washington has consistently used its economic muscle to impose billions of dollars in tariffs on its closest ally, Canada. But what happens when that ally decides it's had enough? In a major turn of events, Canada just launched a multi-pronged counteroffensive, a strategic retaliation that threatens a vital economic artery. This isn't just another flare-up in a long dispute. This is a deliberate, calculated move that has sent shockwaves through Washington, threatening to upend roughly a quarter of America's lumber supply. The panic in the halls of power is real, and it's just getting started. So, why the scramble in Washington? To get it, you have to understand this isn't a new fight. The US-Canada softwood lumber dispute is a zombie trade war that has been lurching along since 1982. For over 40 years, the argument has been pretty much the same. The US lumber industry, backed by powerful lobbies, claims that Canada is cheating. They argue that because most Canadian timber is grown on public land, Canadian provinces can charge artificially low stumpage fees to harvest it. In their eyes, this is a government subsidy that lets Canadian producers flood the US market with unfairly cheap lumber, hurting American mills and workers. Canada, for its part, has always rejected this claim. For decades, they've argued their pricing is based on different market conditions and that their system is perfectly fair. They've fought back through international tribunals and often won, proving that US calculations for these duties were flawed. But the disputes never truly die. They just go dormant before roaring back to life. And in the last year, this conflict has roared back with a vengeance. After the last major agreement expired in 2015, tensions simmered until the US decided to crank up the heat. Washington began a relentless campaign of tariff escalation. By late 2025, the combination of long-standing anti-dumping and countervailing duties, plus new tariffs, pushed the total rates on Canadian lumber to punishing levels, with some rates exceeding 40%. But it didn't stop there. The White House then used a powerful and controversial tool, invoking national security, to slap additional global tariffs on timber and lumber products under Section 232, a measure that explicitly included Canada. As if that wasn't enough, a new wave of duties is scheduled to hit on January 1, 2026. These tariffs target finished goods, imposing a crushing 30% tax on upholstered wooden furniture and a devastating 50% tax on things like cabinets and vanities. For many products, these new taxes will stack on top of existing lumber duties, creating an immense financial burden. For years, Canada mostly absorbed these hits, fighting them in court while its lumber industry paid billions in duties. The strategy from Washington was clear: squeeze Canada until its industry buckled. But they miscalculated. They pushed too hard. And now, Canada is pushing back in a way nobody in Washington was prepared for. This is not the same old Canadian playbook of legal challenges and quiet diplomacy. This time is different. Faced with crippling tariffs and an unwilling negotiating partner, Ottawa has unleashed a strategic, multi-front economic retaliation. This isn't one single action. It's a series of calculated moves designed to inflict maximum pressure back onto the United States. First, the Canadian government is taking steps to support its domestic industry. It has announced initiatives to prioritize Canadian materials like lumber and steel in construction and is changing federal procurement processes to encourage sourcing from Canadian companies. The goal is to redirect demand inward, creating a more stable home market for Canadian producers getting priced out of the US. Second, Canada is sharpening its own tariff weapons. The Canadian government has announced it is preparing retaliatory tariffs, echoing the successful strategy it used in the 2018 steel and aluminum disputes. This isn't a random list. It's expected to target politically sensitive American industries, proving that Ottawa has the memory and the will to hit the US where it hurts. Third, they are squeezing the flow of goods. Alongside tariffs, Canada has begun to reduce its tariff rate quotas for certain products, in some cases cutting the fill rate to 0% for free trade agreement countries, complicating trade and adding another layer of bureaucratic and financial pain for U.S. exporters. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Canada is putting its money where its mouth is. To ensure its lumber industry can withstand this economic siege, Ottawa has pledged a massive $1.2 billion in loan guarantees. This isn't a handout, it's a financial backstop. It provides Canadian companies with the capital and stability they need to weather the storm of U.S. tariffs, preventing a widespread collapse and ensuring they remain standing. Taken together, these actions represent one of the most significant and aggressive responses Canada has ever mounted in this 40-year dispute. They have stopped just playing defense and have started launching their own coordinated economic counterattack. So why is this new strategy sending Washington into a scramble? Because the United States, despite its protectionist talk, is dangerously dependent on Canadian wood. And the consequences of its own policies are starting to boomerang with devastating force. The simple, unavoidable fact is that the United States can't build without Canada. America gets roughly a quarter of all its softwood lumber from its northern neighbor. For decades, this reliable flow of high-quality lumber has been essential for building homes, apartments, and commercial buildings across the country. This is where the panic begins. The U.S. housing market is already fragile. Affordability is a huge issue, and the National Association of Home Builders has been shouting from the rooftops that these lumber tariffs are a key driver of the problem. They have publicly opposed the tariffs, arguing that making a key building material more expensive during a housing shortage is economic self-sabotage. Every 2 of 4, every roof truss, every sheet of plywood gets more expensive, and that cost is passed directly to the American homebuyer. The tariff advocates promised a boom in U.S. production. They sold a story where American mills would spring to life and easily replace Canadian imports. And while some U.S. sawmills have tried to ramp up, the overall picture is a mess. North American softwood lumber production actually declined in the first part of 2025. Why? Because the U.S. tariffs are so punishing that they are forcing Canadian mills to cut back or shut down, particularly in timber powerhouses like British Columbia. So, the U.S. policy designed to boost domestic production is, in fact, helping to kill North American supply. U.S. imports of Canadian lumber have fallen, and there simply isn't enough new domestic or other foreign supply to fill the gap. This creates a bizarre and painful price paradox. Even with a relatively weak U.S. construction market, lumber prices have been climbing because the supply is being artificially choked off. Washington's strategy has failed. It hasn't created a self-sufficient lumber industry. It has created higher prices, a more volatile supply chain, and a housing crisis that is only getting worse. That is the anatomy of a panic. But before we get into what this means for the broader trade relationship between these two countries, if you're finding this analysis insightful, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We break down complex economic conflicts like this every week, giving you the real story behind the headlines. Section 4, The Fallout, a trade war on all fronts and what it means for you. This fight is about much more than just lumber. It's a symptom of a much broader and more dangerous fracturing in the relationship between the United States and its largest trading partner. The lumber dispute is just one front in a growing, multifaceted trade war. Lingering tariffs from the 2018 showdown on steel and aluminum are still a major point of contention. The auto sector, the lifeblood of the integrated North American economy, has been repeatedly threatened with disruptive duties. And in response to recent U.S. actions, Canada has already imposed retaliatory tariffs on billions of dollars worth of American goods, with more held in reserve. The political rhetoric has become just as heated as the economic policy. While Canada is now fighting back with its own economic weapons, it hasn't abandoned the legal battlefield. It continues to challenge the U.S. tariffs at the World Trade Organization and through the dispute settlement panels built into the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement, or USMCA. History shows this is a smart move. Canada has a track record of winning these cases, forcing the U.S. to refund billions in duties that were collected illegally. But these legal processes are slow, often taking years to reach a conclusion. And all of this is happening under the shadow of a ticking clock. The entire USMCA trade agreement is scheduled for a joint review in 2026. This upcoming review raises the stakes for every single trade issue, from lumber to dairy to auto parts. If these disputes aren't resolved, they could threaten the stability of the entire agreement. So, what does this all mean for you? It means the cost of living is directly impacted by these decisions made in Washington. This isn't some abstract economic theory. The price of that new home you want to buy, the cost of renovating your kitchen with new cabinets, and the stability of jobs in construction and manufacturing, all of it is tied to this conflict. The tariffs imposed by Washington are ultimately a tax paid by the American consumer. The fallout from this escalating dispute demonstrates a critical lesson. In a deeply interconnected economy, no country, not even the United States, can launch an economic war without suffering from the blowback. The scramble in Washington isn't just about a lack of wood, it's about the dawning realization that their aggressive strategy has backfired, leaving the U.S. economy more vulnerable, not less. We are at a historic moment in the U.S.-Canada relationship. For 40 years, the lumber dispute has followed a predictable pattern of U.S. aggression and Canadian legal defense. That pattern is now broken. The United States escalated this fight with some of the most punitive tariffs in recent memory, expecting Canada to simply absorb the blow once again. Instead, Canada has changed its approach. Through a strategic combination of domestic support, planned retaliatory tariffs, and a buy Canadian focus, Ottawa has signaled that it will no longer passively accept economic punishment. It will respond in kind. The United States is now confronting the consequences of its own actions: a self-inflicted supply chain crisis, rising costs that are hurting its own housing market, and an emboldened ally that is now pushing back on multiple fronts. The very policy designed to protect American industry is now causing it significant pain. This leaves us with the ultimate question: will this forceful response from Canada be the shock to the system that finally forces Washington back to the negotiating table to find a lasting peace? Or are we witnessing the opening shots of a much wider, much more destructive trade war between the world's two closest allies? Let me know what you think will happen next in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the economic forces shaping our world. Thanks for watching.